Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my week number 4 wide receiver start or sit decisions for every single matchup, going from Thursday Night Football all the way up until the doubleheader on Monday Night Football, telling you guys whether I would start or sit the wide receivers in all of those games. But before we can get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 4 wide receiver start or sit decisions for the 2024 fantasy football season. We begin with Thursday Night Football, the Dallas Cowboys at the New York Football Giants. Now, CeeDee Lamb is obviously going to be a start. Now, the Dallas Cowboys effort until the final quarter of last week's game up against the Baltimore Ravens was downright diabolical. It was so bad. It was so bad that it was almost kind of funny. At the end of the day, though, when your head hits the pillow, while Lamb has definitely been a disappointment, especially based upon where we drafted him, he is still getting 7 or more targets every single week, and now is in the perfect bounce back spot here up against the Giants. He is a stone cold lock to be a top 5 wide receiver in my rankings on the week. I have the utmost confidence in Dak and CeeDee Lamb to bounce back in a big way here. Now, Jalen Tolbert appears to be the number 2 wide receiver on this team, with Brandon Cooks taking the back seat. 2 straight games with 5 or more targets for Tolbert and 2 top 34 finishes at the wide receiver position due to that. Now, this is a bit of a spoiler alert. You can obviously see it on the screen. I have Wan'Dale Robinson listed as a start. If you wanted to start Tolbert over Wan'Dale Robinson, I wouldn't judge you. I wouldn't have some crazy argument with you, as they are in a similar range for me. The biggest difference between Wan'Dale and Jalen Tolbert is that Wan'Dale is very clearly, it is crystal clear that he is the number 2 weapon on this Giants team, whereas Tolbert is competing with Ferguson and Brandon Cooks. Nevertheless, though, if Tolbert does end up popping off again, I will end up having to list him as a start going forward, especially since the bye weeks begin next week. Brandon Cooks is going to be a sit, as I already said. When we were talking about Jalen Tolbert, I really do feel as though he is now the number 3 wide receiver on this team. Now, would I be completely shook to the core if Brandon Cooks was the number 2 target this week? Of course not, but I still don't want to start him. When we go to the Giants here, Malik Nabers, I'm not even trying to glaze here. I'm not even trying to give Malik Nabers the gawk 9,000 special. Malik Nabers might be, in his rookie year, the best wide receiver in the NFL, and I am not even kidding. I am not joking. There is nothing funny about it. Malik Nabers is downright fantastic, and he's doing it with Daniel Jones throwing him the ball, which makes it even more impressive. Now, I am glad that I was someone that was telling you guys all summer long that you need to draft Malik Nabers. And while I definitely had some bad takes out there, shout out Zamir White, the winners will outweigh the losers, of course. Nabers has scored 28 points in back-to-back games and has 12 or more targets in back-to-back weeks. He had the Browns defense screaming all game long, and I expect him to bend the Cowboys defense over a washing machine and have another top five showing this week. Wan'Dale, the upside is definitely capped, as Nabers is just sucking in targets like it's his job. Robinson has been a top 35 wide receiver every week of the season, and at some point you kind of just have to start putting some respect onto his name. The Cowboys defense is far from an easy matchup, but with how they've looked this season, maybe this will be another great game out of their opponents, because while the Cowboys defense on paper is good, they have played far from it. I think Robinson is in that fringe start range, the low-end wide receiver 3/flex option. Now, Darius Slayton left last week's game with a thumb injury. The x-rays came back negative. Whether he plays or not, though, you're not going to play the wide receiver 3 on a Daniel Jones offense. Next up, we move to game number 2 here, the beginning of Sunday, the New Orleans Saints at the Atlanta Falcons. We'll start with the visiting team here, the Saints. Now, Chris Olave had his best game yet in week 3 up against the Eagles in a game that I expected to be one of those old-fashioned Western shootouts, when instead the game ended up finishing 15-12 in the Eagles' favor. Olave, though, had 6 receptions on 6 targets for 86 yards and a tug. Chef's kiss, Manu Fuique, and while Carr didn't look as good as he did in the first 2 weeks, I strongly believe the offensive output will be a lot better this week, and Olave deserves to be ranked as a low-end wide receiver 1. Now, Rashid Shaheed. Last week, everyone across America, some of you guys that live in other countries, right? We were all united. We stood hand in hand and started Rashid Shaheed. He exploded in weeks 1, week 2, so it made perfect sense, right? You didn't have to be a rocket scientist to see, hey, you want to start Rashid Shaheed. And I had the utmost confidence in him. And then, once we all started him, we got hit like Marvis Frazier when Mike Tyson KO'd his ass back in the 80s. It was brutal. He had 5 targets for a grand total of 0 receptions, which led to 0 fantasy points. Now, I think the bounce back is coming, right? Everyone's going to be like, oh man, Shaheed bet me over a table. I can't play him this week, right? And then Shaheed's going to have that blow up game. He's a mid-range wide receiver 3 for me, though. And something we talked about last week, when you're a guy that gets 4 or 5 targets every single week, you don't find the end zone. If you don't have that big bomb thrown from Derek Carr to where you gain a bunch of yards, you're probably going to end up not being so hot, but just because of his upside alone and how good the Saints offense could be, I'm still rocking with Rashid Shaheed. Cedric Wilson has 1 target on the season, and I'm not even going to go ahead and blabber on about him for no reason. Plus, there's no way anyone even has him on their team, so you're definitely going to sit him. For the Atlanta Falcons, Drizzy Drake London has been the wide receiver 19 in back-to-back games, which in itself is pretty impressive, just finishing as I know wide receiver 19 isn't the best, but just finishing at the same spot in back-to-back weeks, in my opinion, is impressive. He has also scored in back-to-back games, with Kirk continuing to look better and better as the weeks have gone on, because week number 1, he did not look like himself. Week number 2, he looked good up against the Eagles. Last week, despite the fact that they lost up against the Chiefs, I thought he looked pretty good. So I think that's going to lead to London landing inside of the top 12 more regularly and actually happening for the first time this season, though I don't think this matchup is great enough to rank him there, but he's definitely a mid-tier wide receiver 2 on the week. Darnell, here comes the Mooney, will be a start as well, while London is very clearly the most talented wide receiver on this team. Mooney has had 7 or more targets in 2 straight showings and has been a top 28 wide receiver in both games. I know he will be buried down other people's rankings, but for me, he is in the fringe start range. Now, he's not a guy that you're going to sleep the night before the game, bricked up, not being able to sleep, right? You have a wet dream thinking about Darnell Mooney, but he is in a fine enough matchup to be able to step up to be that low-end wide receiver 3/flex range. He's in the same range as Wandale, who we talked about on Thursday Night Football. Now, it is astonishing that Ray McCloud plays wide receiver in the NFL, and he's number like 34 or 43, something like that. It just looks incredibly stupid. And Ray actually has looked good when he gets the ball, but with his targets having dipped every single week since the kickoff of the season, and with there being so many mouths to feed in Hotlanta, you cannot be starting Ray McCloud. Next up, we move to the Los Angeles Rams at the Chicago Bears. Now, the Rams get a shocking win. I said this in the running back video, but everyone thought the LA Rams were going to get spit roasted in that game, and the LA Rams beat the 49ers. No one thought that they would beat them. Even Rams fans probably expected that they were going to get deep dicked there like some pizza in Chicago. Though it was all done by Kyren Williams. Demarcus Robinson had just 4 fantasy points. The O-line makes things incredibly rough for Stafford. So until further notice, I don't want to touch any of these wide receivers for the Rams, that being DeMarcus, Tyler Johnson, and Atwell. I don't really think they're in the best spot either. They didn't do diddly squat last week. So DeMarcus, Tyler Johnson, and Tutu Atwell all belong on the bench. If I had to start one, though, it would be Demarcus Robinson. For the Bears, I got to give some credit to Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams looked better last week. Now, the first half was definitely a doozy. He didn't look the best, but in the second half, it definitely looked a lot better, which helped out DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. While Caleb Williams is still far from advertised, right? He's far from this generational prospect that everyone was oogling and ogling about in the NFL draft. He is just 3 games into his career, so we kind of need to, slow our roll with him. The jury isn't out on him just yet. The offensive line is still a huge question mark, so that isn't the best for Caleb. But if Caleb continues to play better and continues to give Moore around 8 or more targets a game, it will soon pay off for DJ Moore. I've got him in that mid-range wide receiver 2 for the week. Rome Odunze, while Moore looked good, Odunze looked even better. He's the one who paid off. Yeah. We paid wide receiver 7 on the week. He caught a piss missile from Caleb Williams early in the first quarter and racked up 112 yards on 6 catches and a touchdown. If Keenan Allen misses, and last week was the true coming out party to where now Caleb Williams is going to start really putting it together, it might officially be Rome Odunze season. Now, I'm not going to crown him. I'm not going to fully give him the Gawk 9000 special, the Suka Lamink special here, but I do think Rome Odunze, this week, I'm going to put him in the lower end fringe start range, but I do really think that this could be the beginning of Rome Odunze's ascension in the National Football League as a guy that you want to start weekly. This is something we talked about all summer. Eventually, him and Caleb will get on the correct page, and it will pay off just like we saw last week. I said in the summer when you drafted him, hey, you're probably not going to want to play him for the first couple of weeks of the season. Now, Keenan Allen is old and has missed 2 straight games with a heel injury. Odunze may have surpassed him at this point in the pecking order. If he suits up, Keenan Allen being, I would probably end up benching Odunze. Now, I do declare that I think that Keenan Allen will miss because he's older, and it just gets more and more difficult to come back the older you get. If Keenan Allen plays, though, he is a sit. Next up, we move to the cold like Minnesota Vikings at the Green Bay Packers, the Aaron Jones revenge game. Now, Justin Jefferson continues to look like one of the best, if not the best, wide receivers in the NFL. Now, we'll, hit the brake a little bit here. Sam Darnold, his health, very important. If Sam Darnold, for some reason, is not able to play, he got banged up against the Texans, then we might need to back up a little bit on Jefferson if 9-inch Nick Mullins is in the game. Now, Darnold and friends, the Vikings, they hit the Texans with Thor's hammer. They absolutely torched them in that game, but that was with Sam Darnold, not with Nick Mullins. So if Nick Mullins starts, I'm still playing Justin Jefferson, but he would be falling down my rankings. With that all said, I personally expect Darnold to play. Now, I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sin, so I'm not going to tell you it's a guarantee that Darnold plays, but I think he will play, and that will lead to Jefferson being a top 12 wide receiver. He has scored a touchdown in every single game this season, and he looks great. Shout out Tony the Tiger. He is looking great, like Selena Gomez in Spring Breakers. If you've never seen that movie, make sure you watch it. Continue to fire up Justin Jefferson with confidence as he is a must-start top 12 wide receiver. Next up, we move to Jordan Addison, who has missed back-to-back games with an ankle injury that he left week 1 with. Even if Addison does return with the emergence of Jalen Nailor, I am very pessimistic on my projection of Addison, so I would not be willing to play him. Nailor has scored in 3 straight games and has had 4 targets in back-to-back showings. If Addison misses in deeper leagues, you can play Nailor. But understand, he's like a Shaheed type, where but Shaheed probably will get 5 targets instead of 4, but you get what I mean, right? And Shaheed also doesn't have Justin Jefferson on his team, but Jalen Nailor, if you're getting 4 targets a game and you don't end up in the end zone, people are going to just end up as disappointed with you. For the Green Bay Packers, I love Jaden Riley-Reed. He was one of my favorite draft picks at the wide receiver position during the summer. He was a guy that I heavily advocated for because I believed in Jordan Love. And once Jordan Love comes back, I'm going to be excited. I'm going to be ecstatic to start Jaden Reed. But in a tough spot up against the Vikings defense, and with his upside of breaking off a big play, in my opinion, being limited against the Vikings defense, I think Reed belongs on your bench. Obviously, with how good the guy is, he could have a huge game, right? He could break off that slant, take it to the crib. He could have a long pass from Malik Willis. That's probably going to be shaken like some ass at the club because he's not the best deep ball thrower. Or, they hand the ball off to Jaden Reed, he busts it off. It's definitely possible. But with back-to-back showings outside the top 40, I think starting Reed is honestly just getting too cute at this point. Christian Watson looked solid last week in the Malik Willis revenge game up against the Titans. But just like Reed, even if you started to have some confidence in Christian Watson with Malik under center, the upside is heavily deflated. Romeo Doubs, to me, he's 3rd in the pecking order on the team. And while he does appear to be one of the favorite weapons of Jordan Love Me Tender, Love Me Sweet, the red zone, Jordan Love isn't playing, so we aren't starting any of these Packers wide receivers. Next up, we move to the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Indianapolis Colts. But before we break down this game at the wide receiver position, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog. Now, Underdog is a great platform that you guys are going to want to head over to right now because they have a great offer and deal for you guys. If you sign up with promo code Notorious, you'll be able to claim your free pick like Dak Prescott higher than half a total yard, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. You're going to want to match the Dak Prescott higher than half a total yard with one of the players on the Giants or one of the players on Sunday's games or Monday Night Football. And if both of those picks hit, you'll receive 3 times your entry. Now, if you do end up putting in more than 2 players, which you can do, the payout will obviously be higher. Again, promo code Notorious, or click on the link in the video description to claim your free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. If you're seeing this video on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and, Dak Prescott already played, you'll receive a different free pick, very similar to this one. So back to the Steelers versus the Indianapolis Colts. Now, this is a game that could be fun, right? We got Justin Fields versus Anthony Richardson, but we know how this game is going to go, and it's not very advantageous for the wide receiver position, which means that George Pickens is the only wide receiver that I would be confident starting. And confident also might not even be the right word. The Colts defense is where Oscar the Grouch lives, because it's trash. They're fucking garbage. So this should be a good showing out of Pickens. The targets have been there, but since he hasn't found the end zone, it has definitely hurt him. This is really kind of my one last ride narrative here for Pickens, similar to what we said about Terry and Amari Cooper last week, and they both popped off. While the guy is as talented as they get, the offense is holding them back. They are playing perfect football to win games. Run the rock, make sure Justin Fields doesn't mess everything up throwing an interception, and the defense is going to stand on their heads, play great, and that's going to lead to the Steelers winning games. But for Pickens, he needs to get fed to have great fantasy games and be hit deep down the field, which just isn't happening. He is a mid-tier wide receiver 3 for me this week, strictly because the matchup is so great. Calvin Austin had a good game last week as the wide receiver 16, but with that said, a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. We all knew he had it in him because of the speed, but the production like that will be far and few in between, so starting Calvin Austin would be a little bit crazy. Van Jefferson's another one of those guys like Calvin Austin, incredibly fast, that's going to have a good game every once in a while, though he did leave last week's game with an eye injury, so even if Patchy the Pirate Arg ends up coming back this week, you definitely don't want to play him, especially since, you kind of need both eyes in order to catch the ball correctly. For the Colts, this is our Colts. This is our team. We bleed blue. I'm done. I am done with Michael Shitman Jr. Anthony Richardson will probably throw 3 or more picks in this game. Pittman is down bad. He's down terrible, but he hasn't scored more than 8 points this season. It's time to leave Pittman on the bench. And now that we're all going to do that, right? Everyone's going to take him out of their lineup. The guy's going to go and pop off as the wide receiver 1. This is a tough matchup, though. So if there ever was going to be that big game out of Pittman, it's definitely not going to be up against the Steelers. As suspected, the Alec Pierce Mickey Mouse Clubhouse run came to an end in week 3 with Downs back and with Pittman and Mitchell on the team. It has completely taken the air out of the Pierce hype train. You got to sit him. Josh Downs came back off of the high ankle sprain to 5 targets up against the Bears. Better days may be ahead. You know, there's gold at the end of the rainbow where the Lucky Charms guy is standing, but that better day is not really going to come up against the Steelers. Next up, we move to the Denver Broncos at the New York Jumbo Jets. Garrett Wilson. He has been very disappointing through the start of the season. Now, he hasn't been so bad to the point where you can't sleep at night because you drafted him, but you're definitely feeling unfulfilled. It is like Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers have basically fucking blue balls us every single week. The targets are there, but he hasn't popped the cherry of the huge game yet. He's incredibly talented, but the matchup here up against Patty Surtain, PS2, is far from ideal. I don't think that huge game is coming here. I am still starting Wilson, but he's definitely not going to be ranked inside of my top 12. The rest of this game, we're sitting them all. Now, Al Lazard is an Aaron Rodgers merchant. With any other quarterback, you would never hear this guy's name uttered. You would never. But with Rodgers, every couple of weeks, you're going to see his dumbass in the end zone. And frankly, I am also ready to call him a primetime merchant because in week 1, primetime has a great game. Week 3, primetime scores. But in week number 2, it's just, normal day in Tennessee. Normal Sunday afternoon, he doesn't do anything. He's silent like the night when Santa comes. So now we're back, 1 p.m. I'm not playing Lazard. He also hasn't been heavily targeted since week 1. Mike Williams, I really think if the team does involve him, he could be a flex option weekly, especially with how Rodgers has looked. But who knows if that's going to happen with Allen Lazard, so I definitely don't want to be starting him. Courtland Sutton had 11 targets or more in 2 games this season, and Nix is starting to look better. And I think Sutton will eventually become start-worthy because if you are just the clear target hog in the offense, even with Nix not being the best, and even with the offense being the Denver Broncos, you can still be very productive in fantasy football. With that said, though, this matchup's up against the Jets. It's like, if he was playing up against, the worst defense, like, it's Broncos versus Commanders, Nix versus Jaden Stormy Daniels, you might end up seeing Courtland Sutton have a huge game, but up against Sauce Gardner, the Jets, no way, Jose, Josh Reynolds, Marvin Mims. If you're not starting Courtland Sutton, who's getting 11 fucking targets, you're definitely not starting those guys. Next up, we got game number 7, the Philadelphia Eagles at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, Devontae Smith suffered a concussion on a hard hit late in last week's game up against the Saints. His availability, it's up in the air. Week to week might be the call. He might be back this week. He might miss 5-6 weeks. Head injuries are different from player to player. If Devontae Smith played on Sunday against the Buccaneers, I would not be shocked. He was put on IR, or if he missed 2 or 3 games, I also wouldn't be surprised. So that's kind of the limbo we are in right now. You want to continue to monitor the situation because if he does play, this is a barbecue chicken matchup up against the Buccaneers defense, and he's going to be ranked as a high-end wide receiver too if he plays. If he doesn't play, then guess what? You don't want to play him. Now, A.J. Brown is expected to miss multiple games with the hamstring injury and has already missed 2 games so far. Now, I'm not a doctor, but my humble opinion is that I think he misses this week as well. If he suits up, it's A.J. Brown. You play him. Without him, Johnny Wilson, Perry Campbell, and Britton Covey will step up even if Brown and Smith miss. You're not starting any of those bums. For the Bucs, Chris Godwin has been great. He went crazy in week 1 and 2 and had a solid showing in week 3 up against the Broncos in a game where the Buccaneers got hit with the fucking stone cold stunner. 3 straight games with 8 or more targets and a touchdown. The Eagles defense might be a little bit better than we give them credit for, but you got to keep riding with the train while it's hot, right? You got to keep riding the train when it's playing well. Shout out Thomas the Tank Engine. Godwin is a must-start top 12 wide receiver at this point in the season. Now, week 1 for Mike Evans, it was beautiful, right? The Commanders defense was calling him Poppy all game long. He's the wide receiver 6. And then back-to-back duds. And that's going to make fantasy owners worry. It's going to make them panic. But with Todd Bowles stating today that Evans will be more involved, I'm not going to panic. Evans is one of the better wide receivers in the league. He's a surefire Hall of Famer. And with this game having that high scoring potential, I think Evans should be back at minimum as a wide receiver 2. I got him in the wide receiver 18 to 20 range. So if he does shit the bed again, then we're going to have to start to panic. Jalen McMillan has seen his snaps and targets dip weekly since week 1. This dude is very talented, but it's just one of those situations where there's just too many cooks in the kitchen, too many talented guys on Tampa Bay for McMillan to see valuable enough touches and snaps. Next up, we move to the Bengals at the Panthers. The Andy Dalton revenge game. Can he put the true nail in the coffin of the Bengals? Because I get it, once you go 0-3, you're basically shot from making the playoffs. But if you fall to 0-4, playoffs are not even in the realm of conversation, and the Red Rifle, the Ginger Ninja himself, is going to be fired up here, and I think Andy Dalton could fuck around and win this game. Now, Jamar Chase is back. Dude, he had the Commanders' defense bent over backwards as the wide receiver 2 on Monday Night Football. Last night, 6 receptions on 7 targets for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns, and I can definitely see him putting up the exact same performance this week up against the Panthers. Chase has been a must-start even through his not-so-hot weeks to start off the season, so you got to fire him up as a top 5 option this week. In T. Higgins' return from the hammy, he had 3 receptions on 6 targets for 39 yards. Better days are ahead for the boy, Titty Boy T. Higgins. With Yoshi Voss playing so well, though, it does kind of put a damper into things, but I think we should see Higgins return to form shortly, and he should be ranked as a high-end wide receiver 3 on the week because this matchup is just glorious. Andre Yoshi Voss, back-to-back weeks as a top 22 wide receiver. He deserves a round of applause, and he deserves some credit. Shout out Tim Andercuss. But my expectation with Higgins getting more involved is that Yoshi Voss is just getting knocked down the hierarchy here. Now, he's looked so good that I wouldn't be shocked if he had a good showing, because again, they're playing up against the fucking Panthers. But I'm just not willing to chance it this week. Deontay Johnson. He's a start. Honestly, if there weren't so many great wide receivers in the NFL, I would consider putting Deontay Johnson inside of the top 12 wide receivers on the week. Adam Thielen has been placed on the IR with a hammy injury, and that means that the competition for targets is at an all-time low. Shout out John Bellion. Deontay was the wide receiver 6. Wide receiver 6 last week, and is exactly what I drafted him to be. And I wouldn't be shocked if he did it again. 8 receptions on 14 targets for 122 yards and a touchdown against a Bengals defense that is softer than your clothes when you take them out of the dryer. I really think Deontay Johnson could be ranked. By the end of the week, I might mess around and have him ranked inside of the top 12. Xavier, somebody touching my Leggett, will now be the wide receiver 2 with Adam Thielen out, and that could drastically change his outlook on the season. Solid enough matchup here, but I do think Andy Dalton comes back more down to earth here, so I'd leave Leggett and Jonathan Mingo on the bench, and Mingo, the breakdown for him is he's just simply not that good. So even without Thielen, I'm not playing him. Next up, we got the Jaguars at the Texans. Now, people might see there's a lot of green here, not enough red, and people will be like, Nick, how can you start some of these guys? We'll start with the Texans. I am going to scrap last game for Nico Collins. I'm just going to say, hey, you know what? The Vikings defense had the Texans all shook up. Ooh, and You know, the Texans were in fucking shambles. Prior to last week, though, Nico Cousin Let's Go Bowling was a top 13 wide receiver in both games, and I expect him to be back inside the top 12 this week. The Jaguars just got throttled by Josh Allen and the Bills, so this game is perfect for the bounce back spot for Nico Collins. Stephon Diggs, while I was kind of making fun of him all summer, I did discredit him. He's the clear number 2 wide receiver on this team. He has had 2 top 15 performances already on the season and had 10 receptions for 94 yards last week in a revenge game for himself up against the Vikings. He is a locked and loaded low-end wide receiver 2 at this point. I was wrong on Stephon Diggs, and I was also wrong on Tank Dell. Now, one of these days, Tank Dell will have that top 12 game because he's just that good. You know, the upside alone makes him worthy of a shot. And since the touchdown luck really hasn't gone his way, and the fact that he has gotten 6 or more targets in 2 games, eventually he'll score and have that good game. But since he's been down bad every single game, he is just a fringe dart throw, upside shot start. So again, I'm not going to sit here and apologize and say, oh, Tank Dell's definitely going to have a big game here. I mean, he should. The Jaguars defense sucks, but we've seen what we've seen, and it would just tell us that Tank Dell's clearly the number 3 guy there. Despite the dismay, maybe that's even a nice way of putting it, dismay. Despite the dismantling of the Jaguars, Brian Thomas Jr. has kept his head above water and looks like the best wide receiver on this team. He is definitely getting screwed over by the quarterback play, and the team as a whole just isn't good. So that's going to restrict me from ranking him higher. He is just like a wide receiver 3 flex play type of option. If you have Tank Dell and BTJ, Tank Dell is way more upside, but I'd probably play Brian Thomas Jr. Now, when it comes to Christian Kirk, I'm going to list him as a start. But frankly, I would rather staple my balls to the side of my leg than play Christian Kirk, because the offense is just so bad. But Kirk did look a lot like the Kirk you drafted him to be last week. 8 receptions on 10 targets for 79 yards. I still definitely prefer Brian Thomas Jr., and that's why if you look at the screen, Brian Thomas Jr. is ahead of Christian Kirk. But I still think Kirk is a valuable dart throw last-ditch option, which makes him fringe start worthy. Now, Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis. I told no one to draft. I didn't tell a single soul to draft him, so hopefully you guys didn't draft him. If you're new, hit that subscribe button, though. Maybe you drafted him. I just cut him. Deshaun Watson, he was not in the NFL. Deshaun Watson was magically zipped out of existence, Thanos snap, and Gabe Davis would have the worst contract in the NFL. The guy is getting paid $39 million to do nothing. Now, I can't completely blame him. You can't completely blame him because of how bad Trevor Lawrence has been, but Gabe Davis has been so underwhelming his whole entire NFL career. Outside of that one game against the Chiefs, really hasn't done anything. Next up, we got the Washington left hands up. Who are we? The Commanders at the Arizona Cardinals. The start of the 4 p.m. slate. We had a whole rant in the running back video about how stupid it is that last week we get all the fun games. Ooh, I know the games didn't end up going the best, but so many games early, so many games late, perfectly balanced as all things should be. And then this week, they give us straight slop at the 4 p.m. slate, except for this game. I actually like Commanders at Cardinals. Now, we talked about this earlier. We hinted at this earlier. Last week was our one last ride with Terry McLaurin, and he paid off bigly. 20 fantasy points, 4 receptions on 6 targets for 100 yards and a touchdown. Jaden Daniels threw a rope his way. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a solid showing against the Cardinals defense last week. Now, am I saying that Terry McLaurin's as good as Amon-Ra St. Brown? No, but the Cardinals defense also isn't all that great. Now, I will say that this spot kind of reeks of Terry disappointing, right? Because the Commanders just looked so good up against the Bengals, right? They literally slapped them front hand, backhand. They dominated in that game. The offense was unstoppable. Now they're going up against another good matchup. So then they just completely stink. Now, again, that's just like a gut feeling of mine. I'm still going to play Terry McLaurin in the low-end wide receiver 2 range to high-end wide receiver 3 range, but that's just something to keep in mind, like something to, log in the back of your mind that Nick said, maybe, just maybe, the Commanders' offense shits the bed here, because, again, last week they looked amazing. Now, the rest of the Commanders, Luke McCaffrey was a quirked-up white boy with a little bit of swag who was goated with the sauce last week. 3 receptions for 44 yards. Real lunch pail type of guy. Who would have guessed that Luke was the McCaffrey that has the most amount of yards through 3 games of the season. It is cool to watch Christian's little bro catch the ball, but there's no way anyone in their right mind is starting him. Noah Brown looks solid out there, but the targets aren't really coming his way. Just like Luke, you're not really going to want to start wide receiver 2/3 on the Commanders offense with a quarterback that runs the ball as much as Jane Daniels, though, what a steal that's looking like. Again, it's just 3 games. I understand, right? We're not going to fully gawk him yet, right? We're not going to do tricks on that thing like our name was Tony Hawk just yet. For the Cardinals, Maserati Marv had another solid outing after a huge performance in week 2 up against the Rams. The targets are coming, and they're coming often. Pause. Back-to-back weeks with 8 or more targets and back-to-back weeks with a touchdown. We just saw how great Chase did against the Commanders, and I think Marv could put up a similar or potentially even better performance. He is a locked and loaded top 8 wide receiver for me on the week. Greg Dortch and Michael Wilson feel interchangeable as the wide receiver 2 and 3, and what I mean by that is one week it's going to be Dortch, the next week it's going to be Wilson, vice versa. You kind of never really know who it's going to be. Now, last week, Wilson was the wide receiver 28, but with there being so many questions on who the true number 2 guy is, I get maybe Trey McBride doesn't play, so that'll lead to Dortch or Wilson seeing more work. And maybe if you're in a super deep league, you want to take a shot on one or the other. But again, with the split being so close, I don't even really feel confident enough to tell you which guy I would start. Gun to the head, I'm playing Wilson. But again, that's just a very out there take. Next up, we got the Patriots at the 49ers. Now, it seems like DeMario Teach Me How to Dougie Douglas is the wide receiver 1 on the Patriots. He looked good up against the Jets, going 7 for 69. Very nice, I like. But with Jacoby Brissett being bad and with the offensive line not being great, and with the team's goal just being to run the ball a million times, I would be shocked if he repeated. Plus, Polk is eventually going to start to suck in more targets until they switch to Draco May. You just can't be starting any of these Patriot wide receivers. Polk, Osborne, they all belong on the bench. Juwan Jennings put on the performance of the season so far in LA against the Rams, wide receiver 1, with 11 receptions, 12 targets, 175 yards, and 3 touchdowns. 3 touchdowns. He got a triple. He got that UAV. If you had Juwan Jennings and lost, please let me know. If you started him. Now, if you sat him, I'm not going to hate on you for that. But if you started him and you lost, let me know because that seems virtually impossible. Ayuk is going to draw the best defensive back, and that means Juwan is primed for another smash. But this is a big but. Shout out to Summer Rae. This kind of feels like another one of those situations where he plays so good, and then you play him. You had him on your bench, and now you play him, and then you end up bummed out. He takes a dump on your team's chest. I'm going to rank Jennings, though, over Ayuk. I don't give a damn. I'm just going to do it. Ayuk, man, I love Ayuk. I did in the summer. I loved Ayuk. The efficiency numbers were off the chart. They were off the chain. They were off the heezy. He was looking so good. And then there's all that contract negotiations. And now he's here. And Ayuk is like that guy on the internet that talks a lot. He's got a lot to say. His profile picture isn't him. It's, some fucking random person. And then you meet that person in real life, right? They're chatting your ear off online. They're saying things about you. They're telling me that I look like I have fucking tits the size of Sydney Sweeney, this, that, the other thing. And then you meet them in real life and, they're just keyboard warriors, right? They're built like they should be protecting Brock Purdy's blind side. That's what Ayuk is, right? He's a keyboard warrior. He gets all the money. He makes the whole summer about him and then proceeds to do diddly squat, right? Last week was the real tipping point, right? Oh, no Debo against the Rams. He's got it. He's getting at least 15 points. Minimum 15 points. He gets 8 points. Actually, he doesn't even get 8 points. He gets less than 8 points on 10 targets. Now, I'm not going to quit Ayuk, right? But this guy is all bark, no bite. As of right now, as far as I'm concerned, that's all I'm going to say about him. I have him as a low-end wide receiver 2 right now, and by the time you're watching this, he might even be ranked, or by the time the rankings video comes out later on the week on Friday, he might be ranked even lower. The other wide receiver there is Jacob Cowing, which sounds like a generated Madden wide receiver, like you're You're in your next season's draft. You won the Super Bowl in 2024. You're in the draft and you draft Jacob Cowing in the 7th round. He's a computer-generated name. Debo's out. Cowing will be the wide receiver 3, with Jennings, Ayuk, and Mason, though, seeing so much volume. Even if Kittle's not back, you're not playing Jacob Cowing. Next up, we move to the Browns at the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, Davante Adams has had one amazing game and 2 not-so-hot games, which was exactly my worry when drafting him. I said it all summer. Davante Adams is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Stuck in an awful situation. It's like that meme that probably every single one of you guys have seen. It's the nice car, Ferrari, Bugatti. I'm not a car guy. I don't fucking know what the car is called, but it's a supercar, okay? It's something you would drive around in GTA, right? And then it's parked next to a house. It's not a mansion. It's a trailer, right? So it's Davante Adams, the Maserati, the Ferrari, on a bad team. Now, the matchup isn't great, and with Pierce throwing Gardner Minshew under the bus, it appears the locker room might be down bad. Regardless, you're playing Adams. But I just can't trust him enough to rank him inside the top 12 because, the Browns, they might be on fraudulent alert. But I'm a little bit worried just about, the quarterback play as a whole and how that helps out Adams. And really, it doesn't help him. It just hurts him. Personally, I do highly doubt both Jacoby and Trey Tucker Eiffel Tower the Browns defense like they ended up doing last week. They both had big games that we're about to talk about. I don't think Adams is going to get left out to dry again, but I just can't do it. I can't put him in the top 12 anymore. For the rest of the guys, Jacoby was the wide receiver 9 in a great performance last week against the Panthers. I love Jacoby, but the same thing with Davante, except for Davante's just better, right? I'm fine playing Davante because he's Davante Adams. I like Jacoby Myers, but I can't play him because of the offense. The offense just moves the ball at a snail's pace, and they have 0 running game. If you could just magically, rub the genie bottle, or at the flick of a finger, they insert a new quarterback here, then you might be oogling and ogling all over Jacoby Myers. But that's not the reality we live in. We live in a reality where fucking it's either Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. And against the Browns, we're not playing Jacoby Myers. Trey Tucker, I barely knew her, also went crazy. He actually had the better performance. He was the wide receiver 8, almost 100 yards, 7 receptions, and a touchdown. Though, I expect a crash down to earth here, as Adams will likely be the one having the good game for the Cleveland Browns. Despite Deshaun Watson looking no bueno for a majority of that game, Cooper had a huge performance. 7 receptions on 12 targets for 86 yards and 2 touchdowns as the wide receiver 5. Now he is completely at the mercy of Deshaun Watson. But the targets are hefty. They're always coming his way, and he has 8 or more targets in all 3 starts. While the risk is there because of Deshaun Watson, against the Raiders defense, though, I think Cooper could have another big showing similar to last week. He is a mid-tier wide receiver 2 for me. Obviously, the floor is the basement, but the ceiling is very high. Big booty Jerry Jeudy has had 6 or more targets in all 3 games, and is just outside of being a startable guy. If I expanded the list by a player or 2, Jerry Jeudy would have ended up as a start. But now with Cooper truly arriving into the offense, I think that does make me question Jeudy a lot more. And with Watson just not being good at all, I think Jeudy should be listed as a sit. Elijah Moore, Jets legend, is also going to be a sit. Next up, we move to the Kansas City Chiefs at the Las Vegas Raiders, the final game before we get on into the Sunday night game, and then the doubleheader on Monday Night Football. We got the Chiefs at the Chargers. Rashee Rice, at this point in the season, is a clear top 8-ish wide receiver every single week. No ifs, ands, or buts. The guy might end the season averaging over 10 targets. 14 targets last week with 12 receptions for 110 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver number 3. I think Rice should easily be a top 12 guy this week, and he is the definition of a must start. With Kelsey getting no action, Kelsey sleeping on the couch, Worthy being a 4-target max guy, Rice is in the driver's seat. In an offense led by Mahomes. Nick Mahomes hasn't played great this season, I know. But, Mahomes not playing great is still one of the best quarterbacks in the league. It would be insane. It would be foolish to rank him any lower. Now, just like we talked about with Rice, Xavier Worthy is going to be a couple of targets a week guy. Now, he could easily smack a top 12 game due to how fast he is. But at the end of the day, we can't predict these top-end games for Worthy, especially because the Chiefs' offense isn't truly popping off, so I'm going to sit him. Boo Smith-Schuster found the end zone last week, which is honestly funny to see the TikTok legend hitting the end zone on Sunday night. But even without Hollywood, you would have to be doing some fucking whippets, that Galaxy gas, to start Juju in 2024. For the Chargers, QJ, Quentin Johnston may actually be the wide receiver one on this team. But with Herbert, in my humble opinion, probably being out with Heineke under center against a strong Chiefs defense, you need to pray to the fantasy gods if you have to play Quentin Johnston. You better start praying tonight. You better wear your fucking pajamas inside out like you're trying to make it snow. Throw your fucking boxers in the freezer, right? I'm not playing them, especially against the Chiefs. Without Justin Herbert, good luck. Good luck, buddy. Ladd, you're sitting him as well. Good luck to him. Joshua Palmer missed last week, so if not, Semi Fehoko will be the wide receiver 3, who you're also not going to play. Next up, we got Sunday night, because you waited all day for Sunday night. The Buffalo Bills are on, they're just doing a tour of primetime. Thursday night, they smack the shit out the Dolphins. Monday night, they smack the Jaguars. And on Sunday, will they smack the Ravens? We shall see. Now, Khalil Shakira, oh baby, when you talk like that, has seen his targets ramp up weekly, and it is very clear that Shakira is the best wide receiver on this team. One tug in 2 out of 3 games, and with me being excited for his shootout here, I think Shakira belongs in the wide receiver 3 flex range. He's another one of those guys, though. Not a target hog. Now, he could become one. Could be like a 6, 7, 8 target guy that he deserves to potentially be, but right now he's more of like a 3, 4, 5 target type of guy. Keon Coleman scored last week. Hallelujah! On his only target, though, in the ravaging of the Jaguars, which is cool. The rookie gets his touchdown, gets the monkey off the back, but the team clearly doesn't have enough confidence in him yet to feed him. And with my strong belief that Shakir is the guy, you can't play Coleman. Curtis Samuel is yet to have one of his vintage performances. And if you haven't played fantasy football before or don't remember the vintage Curtis Samuel, it's randomly, it doesn't matter how old he is. It doesn't matter what team he's on. He could be on the worst team in the NFL, the best team in the NFL. He is going to magically pull a 20-plus point performance out of a hat, like a fucking magician, right? He's randomly going to score 20 points, maybe 30 points, randomly. Once, twice, or 3 times a season. But it's going to be random. It's going to come out of nowhere. So, you can't be playing him either. For the Ravens, despite the Ravens going bananas up against the Cowboys, they were going crazy. Flowers had a down game with just 3 receptions on 4 targets for 20 yards, which really sucked. This, though, is going to be a way better game environment for Flowers, as last week against the Cowboys, it was the Derrick Henry show. Run the ball gently down the stream, because they were literally dancing on the grave of the Cowboys until late on in the game. Whereas this game is going to be higher. I guess that game was high scoring, but this game will be closer, right? The Ravens could be down, having to throw a bunch. They might be up, but the Bills are sniffing up their ass crack, right? To where they're close enough in striking distance to where they have to throw the ball a bunch. So we saw how good Flowers was in week 1 and week number 2. And with the Baltimore weapons really just not showing up outside of Flowers and Derrick Henry, he belongs in the high-end wide receiver 2 conversation. Rashad Master Bateman is a 3-target max guy on a run-heavy team. You don't start him. I actually think Nelson Aguilar is better than Bateman, but he's seen just 1 target in 2 of 3 games and maxed out with 3 in week 2, so you're not playing that either. Now we move to Monday night, the first game, my favorite game of the week, because I'm a Dolphins fan. We got the Titans versus the Dolphins. Fins up, baby. Got the hat on all the time. That's the backwards hat we're wearing. If we're wearing a different hat, it's also normally a Dolphins hat, just a different one that isn't white. So, Titans at Dolphins. Now, we're already like 50 minutes into this video, so I don't want to get too angry here. I don't want to get too mad. Don't want to think about the game too much. Don't want to think about it too much. But if the Miami Dolphins do not start Tyler Huntley, I will personally fly to Miami and storm the headquarters. Storm the headquarters with a pitchfork. It was ridiculous what I saw to Skylar Thompson. It was ridiculous. The only start-worthy wide receiver in this game is Tyreek. Without Tua, Tyreek has been banished into fantasy football limbo. The guy is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And watching the All-22, the guy was open a bunch. But Skyler blows dick. He sucks. And he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, so it didn't matter. This week, I expect Huntley to play. I do. And with Huntley as the lead signal caller, that's going to turn the Dolphins' offense around. Things are going to be churning. Things are going to work better. But that doesn't mean that things will be better for fantasy football. It just means as a Dolphins fan, I will be able to sleep at night because at least Huntley will try to do something. At least Huntley won't stand there la-di-da-di-da for 6 seconds. Instead of throwing a Hail Mary, he gets fucking hit from the back. How you like that, right? He'll actually throw the ball. You know what? Maybe it won't be the most accurate, but at least he will try. And that's what I'm looking for out of a quarterback for the Dolphins. I know Tua hasn't been the best, but you know what he does? He steps up in the pocket and he tries. He got a concussion trying to get a first down. I respect that immensely. I want my quarterback to care. Skylar Thompson didn't look like he cared. That's what really frustrated me. Now, I don't think that Huntley's going to elevate Tyreek back to superstardom, but you still kind of have to play Hill because of how fast he is. He can take one dump off straight to the crib. He's a low-end wide receiver 2 to high-end wide receiver 3 for me. You definitely can't afford sit him because, again, he can really just make something out of nothing. But until Oos is back, Tyreek is just kind of screwed. Jalen Waddle, if I'm nervous to start Tyreek, you got to bench Jalen Waddle. Now, it's hard to bench him, right? He's really good. I just don't even think the Titans defense is all that good, but without Tua, based on what I saw last week, there's no way I'm playing him. Braxton Berrios, not only is Braxton Berrios bad, not only is he bad, his ass got pulled out in that game up against the Seahawks. They exposed his ass. They pulled his pants down. It was like I was watching a Girls Gone Wild video. But instead of it being a chick, it was Braxton Berrios. Bro doesn't even have a single catch on the season. He doesn't have a single catch. There is no reason to roster him. Calvin Ridley, D-Hop, and Tyler, yeah, Boyd, are going to be sits as well. Calvin scored twice in week 2 and followed that up. Drum roll, please. Wide receiver 103. Now, I love Calvin Ridley, and I've always been a huge fan of his. But, frankly, with Will Levis being so bad, and with the Dolphins' defense looking solid, I'm not playing Ridley. D-Hop benefited from the downfall of Ridley as he was the wide receiver 17 last week. Hop doesn't look super old and still definitely has gas left in the tank, but I think Ramsey will be on Hopkins, and ultimately, I don't trust Levis to, be able to maneuver around Ramsey. So I think D-Hop might end up getting locked up, don't let me out. And I love Tyler Boyd. He has one of my favorite nicknames. But we're not starting the wide receiver 3 on a Will Levis offense. Next up, we got the final game here. Could be the highest scoring game of the week. The Seahawks at the Detroit Lions. Now, DK has went back-to-back inside the top 12 like he's the early 2010s Heat. He's had over 100 yards in both games and a touchdown in both games. Now, with this matchup being as juicy as it gets, I love DK as a low-end wide receiver 1/high-end wide receiver 2. JSN, besides Metcalf and Charbonnet, the Seahawks offense literally came to a halting stop in the second half in week 3. The Dolphins defense did a great job neutralizing their offensive attack, especially with how good Geno looked and the offense looked through the first 2 games. But, the offense couldn't do anything, even if the defense gave them a lot of opportunities. This led to JSN having a down game after going off the wall, like that Michael Jackson song in week number 2, up against the Patriots. Again, I will continue to bang the drum for a high-scoring game here that will elevate JSN to being a low-end wide receiver 2 to high-end wide receiver 3. Tyler Lockett in my pocket skirt. As a JSN truther, it irks me deep down to the core that Lockett is still on this team and is still as good as he is. And that is just because there's going to be a lot of games this season where Lockett's just stealing the targets away, and he's had 7 or more targets in 2 of 3 games. Now, he hasn't really had a good fantasy output, but the targets have been there. JSN has looked better than him. He does. He's just better. But Lockett's still out there, and the problem with Lockett, even with the targets, though, it's that he has far too low of a yards per reception to actually start him. It will be very annoying all season, but I'm not going to play him. For the Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown, if you have him, you didn't need to hear me praise the guy you knew to start him, right? Week 1, no bueno, stinky game, but then he's been a top 12 wide receiver in the last 2 weeks. With the Seahawks defense not being a pushover, though, that does, put at least light concern on me. But at the end of the day, Amon-Ra St. Brown is so good, it doesn't really matter. He's a staple inside the top five, and he'll be ranked there this week. Jameson Williams followed up his great start to the season with a steaming pile of shit performance with 1 fantasy point up against the Arizona Cardinals with the lowest amount of targets he has seen all year. But with Laporta's availability in question, as Campbell said today, he'll be day to day. I won't quit on Jameson Williams just yet, especially since I expect this to be a shootout matchup. So I definitely got JMO as a high-end wide receiver 3. Tim Patrick, Mia Khalifa Raymond's wide receiver 3 job has been stolen by Tim Patrick, but with so many guys on the Lions offense, Patrick will be a 3-target max guy that you're not going to want to start, nor would you want to roster him. So, thank you guys all so much for watching. If you didn't enjoy today's video, make sure you bro fist that fucking like button like your name is PewDiePie. Hit that subscribe button down below. It would help me out a ton. Leave a comment if you got any questions, and check out Underdog Fantasy. Promo code Notorious to get that free pick, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Again, if you're watching this after Thursday Night Football, you receive a different free pick. That's just like Dak Prescott higher than half a total yard. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.